How is your family at the moment?
Alhamdulillah, family is very well. It's been obviously a month where I've been quite busy because most of the time I'm recording and doing live programs, which they have been very understanding. So,
Yes. I think, Sheikh, we've just gone live actually. So, firstly, I'd like to welcome everyone to this event. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Of course, you know we absolutely miss being in our centre during this holy month of Ramadan. It's certainly been a month like no other. So, brothers and sisters, whether you are in Portsmouth, Fareham, Southampton, London, or anywhere else in the world, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our live interactive Q&A session with our esteemed guest and scholar, Sheikh Muhammad al Hilli. Assalamu alaikum to you, Sheikh.
alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So, as we're waiting for our viewers to join, can I ask how has the holy month been going for you so far?
Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My warm greetings and salam to all the brothers and sisters watching from Wessex Jamaat or anywhere around the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and accept your fast and dedication. I know the month of Ramadan is nearly over, but at the same time, it's been a truly exceptional month for many, many reasons. I think most of us have experienced a month like no other month in our lives. Perhaps most of us have been used to going to mosque. I'm sure the lovely Al Mahdi Center. Most of you miss it. Going there, having the iftar, being with the community. So it's really taken us back to a new dimension. But I guess with the new challenge comes new possibilities, and there's been a lot of learning, alhamdulillah, I hear from mu'mineen, mu'minat, based on the fact that there's been so many majalis out there around the world, online. Even those who don't usually like to put their lectures online are now forced to put their lectures online, and that includes me. So that has been a new dimension that most of us have adjusted to. And I think in terms of a'mal, in terms of being with the family, it's been fantastic to be able to have iftar every day with the family. Obviously, it comes with its challenges, but inshallah, we are heading towards the right direction and hope that within the next however long it takes, we can resume a sense of normality.
Inshallah, I mean that is truly our prayer. Alhamdulillah. Yes, your online lectures have been of great benefit to us for the whole Wessex community and everyone else, I'm sure, that's been tuning in as well. So thank you so much. For all of our viewers, I'm sure you will all be familiar with Sheikh Muhammad al Hilli as a renowned Islamic scholar, speaker, author, and researcher based in London. What you may or may not know is that Sheikh Hilli also has a master's in pharmacy and therefore would feel even more at home amongst the community here in Wessex. I'm sure many of you will have been following his majalis on the Wessex YouTube channel on the non-prophetic stories of the Quran, which have been of an excellent quality. Of course, we are living in strange times. Over the last few months, the world has changed before our very eyes. I'm sure we all miss those love-filled gatherings where we share iftar and recite the du'as together at the mosque. And instead, this year, everyone is tuning in from different locations. But wherever you are this evening, I hope you've had a lovely iftar and are sitting comfortably with your families, inshallah, and ready to benefit from Sheikh's knowledge and insights this evening. Today's program is a live Q&A event. You will be able to ask questions by visiting slido.com, that's slido.com, and using the event code Wessex. It's extremely simple, so even if you're tired, having just had iftar, it only takes about 30 seconds to log on and post your question. The themes for this evening are COVID-19, Ramadan, and marriage. So we look forward to your questions on these topics. But before we commence, we'll start with a short chapter of the Holy Quran. Can we all start by reciting a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wherever you are? Allah salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول صدق الله العظيم. This Surah Fil, chapter 105 in the Holy Quran, which refers to the well-known story when Abraha, the king of Yemen, brought an army of elephants to destroy the Kaaba, is a story that Sheikh Hilli, yourself, you mentioned in your majlis a couple of nights ago. So I just wanted to share one of the learning points from that, really. So we're familiar with this story that despite the powerful and terrifying army that Abraha brought to destroy the Kaaba with these large creatures, these elephants, their downfall came through tiny little birds, some say the size of small swallows, carrying small stones in their beaks. And this story teaches us many things, that when it comes to the wealthy, the powerful people of this world, they plan and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans, and Allah is truly the best of planners. Therefore, we should never feel arrogant that we will be protected by our position, riches, or armies in any way against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And secondly, this surah shows us that sometimes Allah chooses a seemingly small and insignificant agent, such as a small bird, for example, to actually bring about a massive effect. And such is the case truly that we are witnessing before us today. A virus invisible to the naked eye has exerted such a profound impact on on the face of the world, has affected our jobs, our family lives, our relationships, even the way we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and even the very platform for this event this evening. So with this being the case, I'd like to now invite Sheikh Hilli to give a brief introduction to the topic for this evening, as we explore the effects of COVID amongst other issues relating to Ramadan and marriage. Once again, let us begin with salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, wherever you are. Allah Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Thank you very much indeed, Muhammad Jafar. Now, I don't want to necessarily take a lot of the time because obviously mu'mineen, mu'minat, sisters and brothers have heard me a lot during this month of Ramadan. So I'd like to maybe perhaps as quick as possible really get into your questions and any of your comments. You don't have to also have a question if, for example, you may have had a comment about anything that perhaps was said in the majalis, in the lectures, and also you may want something clarified, then please do also send it using the Slido platform. Now, what is interesting as well is that these, just a note about, alhamdulillah, it's an absolute privilege and honor to be able to address the Wessex community, and obviously the wider community around the world. We're benefiting, inshallah. But one thing was, it was a challenge because these topics usually, and I know I divided some of them into several nights, but because of the kind of obviously understandably 15 minutes slots, which is wise because many a times when we're watching online, unless it's something that's moving and unless something it's really kind of dynamic, we lose focus. We don't necessarily keep focusing for a long period of time. So to try and discuss some of these Quranic concepts of a short period of time may have resulted in some of the information not reaching you. So do please forward any questions or clarifications that need to be made. Now, as was mentioned by the Muhammad Jafar at the moment, the idea that I find fascinating about stories of the Quran when it comes to prophets and non-prophetic ones is that they all seem to have common factors, some things that bring them all together. No doubt, Quranic stories are all very purposeful, very to the point, and many lessons can be derived on our day-to-day lives. But it seems from the first story, and that is Satan not bowing down to Adam alayhi salam and refusing to respond to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all the way from different prophets to Musa alayhi salam and his struggle with Fir'aun, even to the people of Saba. This fascinating story that I talked about yesterday. And if any of the mu'mineen and mu'minat have missed this story, do watch it. I would recommend. I don't normally give kind of promotion to my own lectures. But out of all of them, this one seems to be fascinating because I was looking at YouTube to see whether any Shia ulama have discussed the story of Saba, and there isn't much in English about it, unfortunately, regarding the story of the people of Sheba, not Queen of Sheba with Sulaiman, but this is, the entire chapter 34 named after it. But anyway, the idea behind this and many others, you'll see that it constantly comes back in the same point, and that is human beings transgressing, human beings being arrogant, human beings thinking that they are owning everything, and Allah wants to bring them back down on earth. And it reminds me of the beautiful tradition of the seventh Holy Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim alayhi salam, that says, anyone with an ounce of arrogance in their heart will not enter Jannah. And so it is a purification process. COVID-19 and coronavirus, it is certainly a purification process. The rich and the poor, the most powerful and the weak around the world, they have to stay in quarantine. They have to be very, very careful over something that they cannot absolutely can see. And so it is a massive, massive lesson for you and I. Now, one thing I wanted to discuss briefly, and that is the impact of coronavirus on our family setups. Yes, it has impact on financial, for example, situation of our people. All kinds of countries are suffering because of businesses going bust and so on. There is the health element, but one area that has been touched on maybe here and there is relationships, because of course to be with your own family for how, I don't know how long we've been in lockdown now, 10 weeks. I don't know, maybe coming up to maybe 3 months, is an experience most of us haven't actually gone through in our lives. I mean, I remember about 6 or 7, no more than that, 8 weeks ago, I was speaking to a world-renowned, one of the world's most renowned reciters of Nasheed, and I'm not giving you his name, but he was telling me, Sheikh, I've just got to know my kids. My kids are just horrible. They just, all the time in my face. I've just got to know them. He travels a lot. So this time he was like, oh my God, they're in my face 24 hours. So I guess what's happened is that it has a great dimension in that we've been together and spent a lot of time together. But maybe, just maybe, there's been some issues here and there, and it's sparked off some challenges. Definitely, unfortunately, there's been a rise in domestic violence. There's been reports of that here in the United Kingdom, and I'm sure in other parts of the world, especially in the Western world, because those who have been in abusive relationships, if they're kind of, confined with that person who's the abuser, naturally this abuse, unfortunately, is going to increase. But I'm more concerned about whether the lockdown and the quarantine has made marital relationships stronger. This is a question I'd like to pose to all my sisters and brothers, in the sense that, are you now closer to each other after being in isolation, or God forbid, can't wait for that declaration and announcement, so that you can go back to how life was before? And what about children, family setups? Are people closer? Have they discovered more time with their sons and daughters? Because one of the challenges we've mentioned in the past with regards to parenting is, especially fathers tend to be away from their sons and daughters. They don't really know what's going on. They don't know about their education. They don't know about their well-being, friends, and so on. But now, perhaps, they're kind of forced to get to know their kids a little bit more, maybe have more, kind of heart-to-heart conversations, nurture that, bond between the father and the son, and the father and the daughter, and if the mother works, the same. So it will be fascinating to kind of find out what has it achieved. And the final thing I would say is that, as believers, we have to be different, and I mean it in the most respectful ways. We have to be different to others who will sulk and constantly look at this whole experience as a negative one, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us somewhere that we have no control over. And Allah is wise, Allah is just, Allah is merciful. So that means for me that coronavirus and isolation and quarantine over this nearly 3 months that's going to be, or 10 weeks, 11 weeks, must be a good thing. And therefore, in every aspect of my life, whether it's spirituality, whether it's knowledge, whether it's family relationship, I need to use it to better it. yes, there may be exceptional cases where there are already problems in the marriage, and maybe this has made it worse. But I'm talking about general sense of how we can benefit from this and how we can enhance the relationship based on the time that we have. And it doesn't seem to be that isolation is going to go away anytime soon either. So we're not really talking about the end now, although it might be slowly phased out. But how can we benefit from what we went through to go forward and actually enhance the relationships? These are all, inshallah, questions that we will hope to tackle as much as possible.
Ahsan, thank you so much, Sheikh. We will move on to the question and answers now. Alhamdulillah, I can see many of you have already started asking your questions. For those who haven't, the way to do so is by visiting slido.com, slido.com, and just using the event code Wessex. And you can type in your question there. It's very quick and easy to do so. We look forward to plenty of questions from you this evening. Sheikh, you touched on an interesting point that we've heard the phrase "you don't know someone truly until you've travelled with them." Maybe it should be "you don't truly know someone until you've been in lockdown with them."
Yeah.
So I'll move on to the questions now, and I've noticed a few questions on the theme of obviously we're talking about marriage, and obviously there's many questions from people who are married, but also questions from people who are seeking to get married, and Sheikh, so the questions are how does one find a spouse during this time of lockdown, during this time of self-isolation? And do you have any particular tips as to how to find a spouse? What are the things people can do to actually allow people to meet and get to know each other for the purpose of marriage? And are there any specific a'mal or any deeds that you can recommend in order to aid and assist in this process?
It's a fascinating question, actually, because I think only those who are not married will think of such a question. All parents are looking to get their sons or daughters married. Now, what is interesting is that let's just for a moment think about how things were before lockdown in this aspect. Well, how did we manage to find or look for a potential partner or a spouse when there was no lockdown? What were the tools back then? When we say back then, it sounds like years ago, only a few months ago. But the first thing perhaps we used to do is maybe go to weddings. And I know, mashallah, the Khoja community has a lot of air miles traveling around the world, attending different weddings from Dar es Salaam to Los Angeles. And mashallah, it's a lovely thing to be able to honor cousins and relatives and friends and attend their weddings. And yes, may Allah bless our mothers. They go to these weddings and they don't go just to celebrate, they go as scouting, right? So they go fishing for potential candidates for their sons or for others. And may Allah bless the matchmakers out there in the community as well. They're doing a fantastic job. Very few of them, but they're doing an important role. Now, that is not happening now. Weddings are not happening. And just a small thought, not small, but just a thought actually for all the sisters and brothers who are supposed to get married over the last 2 months. And in the summer, I'm sure marriages are not going to happen. Unfortunately, no nikahs are not going to happen. Really, prayers and thoughts for you all. You've been waiting a year, and now you're going to have to wait a little bit longer, unless you do a Zoom or a online nikah ceremony, which can happen. It has been done, I know. So it's possible, but some of you may want the actual mosque nikah, which means you'll have to be a little bit more patient. Now, how do we do it? Well, there are a number of tips to be very quick now in this current lockdown. Number one, well, I always say friends, friends, friends. What does that mean? We need to contact people that we know and genuinely ask them, go through your phone book. This is a tool we use in our marriage courses. When people think it's so straightforward and simple, but sometimes it's quite effective. Go through your phone book. You know me. Who do you think might have somebody, or you might have somebody in your phone book or your phone that has a potential spouse anywhere around the world? And then potentially, then there is a platform which is online now. SubhanAllah, I always say to people in this day and age, if we didn't have these online platforms, and imagine Corona had hit in the 80s, perhaps with only home phones just in the home, and even before that without the actual telephones, we would really be miserable, right? How could we communicate with anyone? Now it's much easier, although obviously face to face is a key aspect. But we can start to really develop an understanding of whether we have any kind of suitability. But here's the thing: those who are looking to get married, how much do you know about what is it that you should be looking for, whether you're ready, what kind of things should you be talking to with the other person? This is where I recommend the excellent book, with my colleagues that I work with very closely, and we do workshops on marriage and spouse selection. Abbas and Shaheen Mirali, Spouse Selection. Get this book if you can, okay? It's not available online to download, but it's available to purchase. And it's really important because it goes through so many, it answers the questions. Are you ready, for example? What should you be asking? Because I certainly I can't imagine, and people do ask, them coming to Zoom, trying to get to know someone first time, Assalamu alaikum, alaikum salam, how are you, alhamdulillah, how is COVID? Not bad. And thinking, okay, what shall I do next? Let me read. Which marja al-taqlid do you follow? Which football team do you which okay, tick 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 tick. Okay, thank you very much, inshallah we'll be in touch. It's not about interview. You're not interviewing someone to see if they're suitable to be your wife or your husband. You're interviewing someone. This is a business. When we go to universities or when we go to colleges or places of work, how do we become friends with people? We have normal conversations, just conversations, talking about our own experiences, and then the conversation flows, isn't it? So this you learn from reading this book or watching lectures and really being educated and equipped with the necessary know-how on who to look for, how to find these people, and how to know if the person's the right person for you. It's not about the person having the same features as you, or that compatibility. I'm a quiet person, I need a quiet person. I don't like this, so I need this person. Sometimes opposites attract. So things like this should be kept into consideration.
Hassan, thank you. There's a lot to consider there, and yeah, as you say, our du'as and our wishes to all those who are seeking to get married. We pray that they are able to find their spouses, inshallah, and we wish them all the best. And those who are trying to arrange their weddings as well, as you say, which must be very difficult, I can imagine. So yes, it's so this is a kind of process when you're seeking a spouse, you're trying to meet someone, get to know someone, that can be difficult and nerve-wracking at the best of times, and therefore, without being able to have that face-to-face interaction, can be even more difficult. Would you have any tips with regards to things that we should be, or people in this position should be looking out for when it comes to online means of communication, whether that's through, for example, WhatsApp messaging, or whether it's through kind of face to face, these kinds of interactions as we're having just now. Um, are there any particular downfalls when it comes to any boundaries that should not be transgressed? And yeah, can you shed some
Sure.
light on
Yeah, thank you on that. There's so much we can say on this, but I'll be very brief. Number one, I don't recommend WhatsApp conversations or text messages between strangers because it's emotionless. And sometimes you might be saying something you've forgotten and the caps lock is on and you think, oh, why is that person angry? Right? So, as much as possible, try to see the person, number one. Number two, if you are getting to know someone in Islamic terms, they are still non-mahram to you. So, that would mean you can't really be talking like lovers. You can't use emojis that are full of hearts and kisses. I'll be honest, there's no hiding from these things. Sometimes they happen. You have to be careful. Shaitan, the hadith says, if two people are alone, the third with them would be shaitan. So it is important that we keep that into consideration. Um, there are, yes, absolutely, there are limitations when it comes to online, but at the moment, obviously, face-to-face meetings, and sometimes if you find someone from abroad, you can only do first few meetings online anyway, in that particular regard. But at the same time, those who are looking to get married, my sisters and brothers, this is my real, heartfelt advice to all those watching. Clean your social media profiles. The first thing some people do when they hear of a name potential spouse is they go and do what? They Google that. They go on Facebook, they go on Twitter, they go on Instagram. God help them if they go on Snapchat, and they go and look for these people, and they think, oh no, this is not the right person for me. So clean those. How would you feel? Show your personal profile to someone else, like a friend, right? And just say, would you be interested when you look at someone who's like that? Do tests, do market research for your own profiles, right? What kind of image have you portrayed about yourself? So that is very, very important, because whether you like it or not, people do that judgment. Even companies today use social media profiles to judge whether an individual is suitable for their role or not. So I think that would be quite useful too.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, it's true that we often are quite careful with the image that we portray in person, but it's interesting that those same thresholds, those same boundaries, are not necessarily maintained when it comes to social media.
Like
It's
for example, sorry to cut. Like for example, sometimes people on Facebook, they're liking certain pages of certain musicians, of certain bands, right? And they're liking Nahju Balaka and Quran, right? They're having conversations with other agendas very loosely, right?
Mhm.
Commenting, they're flirting. This can be seen. The images they've posted on themselves, the selfies, Ya Allah, the selfies. God help us with the selfies, right? God help us with two things: selfies and extreme, extreme Salafis. That's another thing. Yeah.
I mean, so I am aware that we've got loads of questions coming in, which is absolutely great. So let's try and get through them as swiftly as we can. So we've spoken about those seeking to get married. Now, for those who are perhaps newly married, we mentioned this earlier as well, that during lockdown, we seem to be having more time with our spouses. We're getting to know our families better. This can really increase our bonds in some instances, and in other instances, perhaps less so. So, for the couples who are newly married and getting to know each other, having just started on this journey of marriage, and also those who perhaps have been married and are now having to spend more time with their spouses and getting to know each other in that sense, what are the tips that you have to actually help these people to increase their love and bond for each other? And perhaps are there any pitfalls, any certain pitfalls that are typical or common that you would warn people to watch out for?
Yes, I mean, I remember right at the beginning of this COVID situation, I posted something on social media, and that was 10 tips for married couples in this current crisis. And one of the things I said was that, look, give each other space as well. Don't expect, to be with each other 24 hours a day and so on and so forth. You have to respect each other's space, and people like that too. Now, what kind of advice? Well, there's so much to give as far as advice is concerned, but I would give it based on dealing with so many marital issues and challenges, and even, I had to do a talaq on Zoom only a week or two ago. So unfortunately, it does happen. Now, what advice I would give? One of the main problems that sometimes people have as a couple in a marital setup is simply the lack of understanding of each other. We just don't know each other. Number one, as males and females. So my advice is for our brothers, understand how a female setup is, how she thinks, how she likes to talk, what she expects. And for our sisters, understand our brothers. Understand your husband as a male. These kind of books, Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus, are given as an example, but some of the aspects there, I feel, are true, and very much reflective of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the males and the females differently. So I remember reading that there was a person who went to this marital course to enhance his marital relationship between him and his wife, and they got all the men separately, and then they asked them, "We want you all to name your wife's favorite flower. Do you know your wife's favorite flower?" And some of them were staring, "Oh my God, I can't remember." And this guy said, "Yes, I do know." And everyone was really impressed. So they asked him, "What's your wife's favorite flower?" And he said, "Self-raising flower," right? So he thinks that he knows his wife. He hasn't got a clue, right? So he's seen her bake, and that's all. So the point here that we have to understand each other by appreciating expectations and so on. Second thing to note is love. Now, love is a massive area, and we all love to love and be receiving of love. But love has different languages. I'm a very strong advocate of this five love languages that have been presented by this man by the name of Gary Chapman. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. And Islamic teachings way before this individual came forward and talked about how gifts are important, how saying "I love you" to each other really impact you, and will never leave the heart. These are all prophetic statements, right? So you know, the idea that exists is that the couples need to understand their love language. If you haven't done so, go and do online tests. If you're married for 30 years, even do it. If you're married for, 1 year, go and do it. Understand what the other's love language is and work very, very hard to try and give that love in accordance with the most common love language. So just for those who haven't heard of it, and I'm sure most of you have, love languages are, for example, words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service. These things are key. Physical touch. The idea that exists is that sometimes people like this more than something else. They like to be loved in that particular way. The other thing is, despite there being love languages, there are also apology languages. People like to be, kind of told how the other have done wrong in different ways. Some people have to say, I will not do it again. Some people have to explicitly, I'm sorry, and so on. And this brings forth the whole notion of patience. I remember one of the scholars saying in this period, he said, one of the challenges I find is that I'm praying Salatul Jama'ah together collectively. So I have to wait for my wife and it takes ages. He says, I'm waiting because she says, for me, it's not as easy as quick as for you to do wudu. I have to be waiting, so I wait for my kids, I wait for my wife until they all come and congregate so that we can do Salatul Jama'ah together. So patience is absolute key. And remember, for those who have just got married, don't be influenced by Hollywood, Bollywood, soap operas, these kind of false sense of assurances that everything is cool and everything is good. The first, according to statistics, 5 to 8 years is the most challenging in a marital relationship, where you're unraveling each other, understanding about each other's characteristics and personality. So you get to know each other and what really annoys the other and so on and so forth. So on that basis, have so much patience, but with know-how and knowledge, and understand what is key about the other and how one is able to serve for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But key final point I'll mention in this particular question, and that is it's tested and tried. If the husband and wife have similar interests in that they want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then develop an understanding of gaining knowledge, ibadah, spirituality, together collectively as much as possible. I know children sometimes, but set time, for quality time and discussion on some really key subjects. Do an activity together that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, that you may want to do after a month of Ramadan when things ease. For instance, to volunteer at the mosque or somewhere else, for example, at the madrasa, to do something together might be also quite effective to unite and bring forward the hearts collectively.
Ahsan. Sheikh, I'm going to ask a question that's been posed here, which you're touching on towards the end there, actually, about how is it that marriage takes us closer to God? And can you expand on why this is something that is said to complete half of our faith?
Okay, there is a very interesting philosophical argument, and I know people have just had their iftar and it's night, but there is two arguments. If we had this session at 8, people will say, I'm starving, I can't focus. If we have it after iftar, they're like, oh, my stomach is full, I can't focus. But anyway, inshallah, you can kind of, the mu'mineen, mu'minat can follow with me. There is a very interesting philosophical idea here with regards to what is known as an effective combination and a useless combination, or just a physical combination rather. So if I bring these two pens together and I put them together, this in philosophy or philosophical terms is a physical combination. A physical combination means just two things touching each other, but doesn't result in anything. Nothing happens, just two pens touching each other, right? But when I bring oxygen molecules and hydrogen molecules and I bring them together, this is what's called the real combination. A real combination means these two will yield something effective, and that is water, of course. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran has said that bringing the souls, the believers, the males and females, together under His watchful eyes and under His blessings and mercy is a real combination. It's not just a physical combination. Right? When non-believers, when they want to get married, do you know when they want to get married? After 10 years of being together and they have kids, they're like, okay, let me get married. Let me settle down. Right? For us, no, because we're not allowed to have physical or any other relationship with a non-mahram. Therefore, we come together and that creates a real combination. Now, what is the result of this? We said oxygen, hydrogen, real combination, water. But what is the result of a male and female coming together in zawaj, which is blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Jannah. That's the result. That is the goal. right? So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, number one, at the outset, has created needs for human being, and these needs need to be fulfilled legitimately. So the only way they can be fulfilled legitimately for both males and females is through marriage. You know, the need to be with the opposite gender. That's number one. But more importantly, number two, it seems that when this family unit is established, it becomes one of a great path and an important building block for that society that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that community Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, in ensuring that the principles and the teachings of the religion of Islam are enhanced. Sometimes when people say, when I look for a wife or when I'm looking for a husband, what should I be looking for? I say, look for the father or the mother of your children and the grandfather of your children, and and of the offspring that are going to come. You are talking about legacies of years and years, thousands of years possibly, that you're building by making that one decision. That one decision is going to determine years until the day of Qiyamah for you, because these children are going to pray for you, their children are going to pray for you, their children maybe are going to become maraja or great human beings or people who influence this society and make a huge contribution. Who's going to get the thawab? You are. This is sadaqah jariyah. Sadaqah jariyah, people say give orphans. Definitely. Sadaqah jariyah is ilm. Definitely. Marriage is sadaqah jariyah. It is. Maybe you've never heard this before. It is sadaqah jariyah, because when you get married, you're investing in your akhirah. Now, why are we safeguarding half of our religion? Because one of the most effective tools of shaitan is to get to people who are not fulfilling their needs physically, but also to make them despondent, but also if they're bored, to make them commit haram, and so on and so forth. And together, collectively, as a unit, one is able to support each other at times of hardship and difficulty. One is able to, help each other understand things. And this is where loyalty comes in. This is where, for example, the idea of patience comes in, because as a husband and wife, what they would do is, if somebody having a bad day, and by the way, this happens in Corona time and outside Corona time, there will always be one of them who might be having a bad day. Yes, if this is no way generalization or any way disrespectful, but brothers need to know that sisters will go through certain days of the month where they may need more emotional support. If we don't understand that, then we're not really going to be able to build an effective household that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. Ultimate answer to this question, why is it and how does it get us closer to Allah? Allah has created us this way. He wants it this way. He knows best. He's engineered us. He says, you need to come together as couple. That pleases me, and I will infuse it with love and mercy, and you will get to Jannah together, inshallah.
Ahsan, thank you so much. Um, yes, I think I found, that through marriage there are, we all seek to demonstrate the qualities of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala in our lives, and I find that marriage provides a really a unique and amazing opportunity to be able to do this in a way that you don't have the chance to in other aspects of life, and so it's a really beautiful experience, mashallah, and I pray that all of those who are unmarried in the community get this opportunity soon, inshallah. Speaking of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I just want to pick on, before we go to the next question, just want to pick on a hadith you mentioned the other day in one of your majalis. And, I really feel, alhamdulillah, that the Khoja community, I don't know if you found this, Sheikh, that the Khoja community are a community that are indeed very, very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason I say that is you mentioned a hadith a few days ago that there are two things that pleases a mu'min. And the first is when it comes to the time of iftar. Now, I know with the Khoja community, there's no doubt at all that when it comes to iftar time, there's nothing that's going to stop us from smiling, mashallah.
Yes.
When we see all the samosas and the various treats, and our chai, etc., we become very happy. And the second thing you mentioned is also the liqa of Allah, the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes we look at what we're eating for iftar, the amount of oil and sugar that we're consuming. I think perhaps, we're not worried about death coming to us, so perhaps we even love that idea of the liqa of Allah. So, alhamdulillah.
Well, with regards to, mashallah, the Khoja community, I really enjoyed my a time in different parts of East Africa, for example, Dar es Salaam and Nairobi and Mombasa. Last year I was in Mombasa. Fantastic generosity, really nice atmosphere in the month of Ramadan. Yes, the food is fantastic there. You know, as a non-Khoja, I enjoy it. Although you're absolutely right, after going first year many years ago to Dar es Salaam, I did definitely gain a few kilos based on the oily food that I was having, the nundus that I was consuming, the mandazis every single night with chai. It was full of sugar. So yes, definitely, it is something that the Khoja community love in their food. But by the way, you know, I know we're joking, but it is reflective of generally human nature. Food tends to bring happiness in the hearts of many people. But just to kind of quantify that hadith, because you mentioned it, you know, it says, "Lil-mu'mini farhatan." Believer has two real moments of happiness. Farhatun and the iftar, to have a farha, to real happiness at the time of iftar. But it seems to be, to me anyway, not because they're eating food, not because they're break. It's because of the sense of, yeah, they're pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the moment. It's like Eid. You know, there's two types of celebration of Eid. There are people deep inside, they're in sorrow because the month of Ramadan is over, but they're happy because they've achieved something. And there are those who celebrate because they've had enough. They just want to get out of Shahru Ramadhan. They want to go back to their lives. Oh, I missed my coffee. I missed my this. And they just want to get out. And so they celebrate because of that. So can you see, they're both outwardly celebrations, but they have more, different reasons for that joy in the heart.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to move on to the next few questions. Now, there's been a few questions about the roles of the husband and the wife. We are told that that the role of the husband is to provide, to be the breadwinner of within the relationship. Someone's asked whether this is there is Islamic basis for this, or whether this is just a cultural tradition. And secondly, that is this provision of basics, essentials for the family, something that is to be done as per the expectation of the wife, or is it more based on the means that is available that the husband has to provide? And similarly, linked to this issue is the question of, if it's the case that actually the wife is the main earner within the family, does this change at all? We are seeing more and more that actually, many professional couples where both of them work, it may be that they have an equal income, it may be that one has a greater income than the other. Does this change the dynamic at all with regards to what the Islamic tradition is, and how can we implement these teachings in our relationships?
Yeah, in order to answer this question, we have to very briefly look at what are the rights and responsibilities of husband and wife in a marital relationship Islamically, as far as law is concerned, as far as Sharia law is concerned. Because we have two things. We have what is minimal that has to happen, otherwise, there is unfortunately potential for problems, and also one is sinning. And then we have what is ethically expected and highly recommended. So please mark these two separate things, because sometimes when we speak about the minimum, people get upset and say, "Oh, but do I have to do that and whatever?" This is the minimum. We're talking about really looking beyond, in order, because this is not a business relationship. This is a relationship based on harmony, love, respect, coexistence, and really building ourselves together. So the minimum, or what is required for the husband to provide for the wife, is, or her, the rights of the wife over her husband, is that he must provide her with accommodation, with food, and with clothing that is sufficient and acceptable in the understanding of the common people, urf. This is an opinion of Ayatollah Sistani. Some other maraja back in the time said no, different criteria, but the current ruling is that it's what is normally acceptable, not necessarily what she's used to back home when she was with her own parents as such. So even if she's the world's richest female, even if she's the breadwinner, every responsibility falls on the shoulder of the husband. However, this is what we said, minimal. Ethically, akhlaqi, morally, as far as recommendation, if the wife is working, it's great that she supports the husband. It's amazing. Allah will be pleased with her. She gets a lot of thawab. But the husband must not be placing pressure, Let's not be constantly demanding, you pay for the mortgage, I'm just paying this, you're not contributing anything, and so on. The more she contributes, the more the husband will have respect for her and love, no doubt, because he feels that she's a partner in removing the burden from his shoulders. That's number one. Number two, a husband must be also making sure, committing to having the physical relationship at least once every 4 months with his wife. That is a responsibility that falls on his shoulders. And the third thing is that he must not be abusing her and must not be harming her, violently, physically, and so on and so forth. This is the key aspects of the responsibility of the husband over his wife. Now, the wife, what is the responsibility she has that she must fulfill for the husband? Well, number one, she can't leave the house without his permission, but that doesn't mean every single time. It means generally, if there is a consensus amongst them that he's fine, he allows her, then that's okay. But number two, she must be happy and willing to conduct or take part of the physical interaction between them whenever he wishes, and except if she is ill or, for example, she's going through a certain time of the month. But essentially, these are minimal. We are, people who deal with challenges, we come forward and say that successful marital relationships are not based on people keeping these. Way much more than this. Way more than this. Because what happens is, the husband comes and says, if they do just minimal, they say, okay, I'm not going to let you leave the house if you're not going to do this. And she comes forward and says, and by the way, all the work that, may Allah bless our wives, our mothers, when they do at home, as far as cooking and cleaning and everything else, she doesn't have to do in terms of the basics. But morally, it's great that she does it. And it's amazing that some of our brothers who have never washed any dish in their lives have now 10 weeks of washing dishes in quarantine. May Allah bless you all. I know that some of you have learned how to cook, some of you have baked, some of you are washing the clothes, some of you are teaching your children and praying for those teachers at schools and saying, how on earth do you do it? And, may Allah bless you all. I think it's great learning experience. We've been put back down to earth to try and really get part and be involved in this whole process again. So, in answer to your question, yes, they need to be able to make sure that the husband or the father provides for the children, provides for the wife. But if he's going through difficulty, if he's going through financial hardship, like some people are, understandably, our hearts go to them, our dua to anyone who's been affected, and there's loads of people being affected financially. This is where the loyal, faithful, strong wife comes in and says, you know what? This is a difficult time. I'm not going to be demanding to buy this or this and the other. We're going to try and, have a budget. We're trying to stick to it. I'm going to help. We've got savings here. Unit, working as a team. Working as a team is so crucial. If they love each other, they respect each other, they try to overlook each other's problems and gradually move on in life in that spirit.
Ahsan. Yeah, it's a really good point actually that I suppose these rights and responsibilities are there to actually help safeguard each individual within the relationship. But actually, if you want to generate that loving, positive relationship, then really it's not just about these minimal requirements, but actually how we can go above and beyond these to develop that bond in relationship. Thank you so much for sharing that question. The next question is about resolving conflict. We may find that there is more opportunity for conflict in these current lockdown situations. So, do you have any tips or advice for couples on what to do if they encounter conflict within their relationship, how to avoid this if they do encounter it, how it can be overcome?
Yes, I think you see, conflict management is another amazing, very important subject that is key when it comes to marital setups and for us to understand why conflicts happen. You see, because they are very normal. People say, I'm having a lot of arguments and conflicts in my marriage. Is that normal? Is that something that I should be worried about? Well, it's not. Maybe if it's too excessive and it's happening every few minutes, maybe. But generally, in a marital relationship, we have to expect conflicts, right? And the biggest mistake is to try and avoid it. A study I remember of 1,000 adults by New York bestseller book called Crucial Conversations, found that couples who argue more effectively are 10 times more likely to have a happier relationship. It's about knowing how to fight right. That's what it is. And some tips here I would give you, and that is, usually there's a pattern. We need to identify a common reason why conflicts and arguments happen. Is it because the husband's not putting out the rubbish bin on a certain night of the week? Is it because that they're leaving something on the side and not doing something? Is it because needs are not being fulfilled? Remember, each has needs, and our sisters, they have more emotional needs than physical needs. Our brothers have more physical needs than emotional needs, but both have to be met, right? And if they're not met, then there's going to be potential problems. Now, when dealing with conflict, it's very important that we realize that we have to set aside any form of abuse, anger, raising voices, using vulgar language. We have to speak slowly, we have to speak softly, and we have to have ground rules. Have ground rules when you're not in argument or in a conflict, so that when you are, you respect them, right? For example, not interrupting each other. That's very, very important. The other thing is listening. Now, most of us do not listen to understand, but we listen to respond. That's the problem. If we listen to understand, and I use what is known as emotional intelligence. Now, if you haven't looked up emotional intelligence, do so. There are tools out there for emotional intelligence for couples. Emotional intelligence is very, very powerful. Essentially, it's about making us feel how the other person is feeling, just to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, to try and feel that empathy, to try and feel that understanding that needs to be there. And when I listen, I need to see, okay, what? Maybe I've done something wrong. I know there's rage inside me. I know I want to prove that I'm right. I want to, establish my authority. But this is where the next point comes in. We are believers. We are being watched by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Malaika are constantly writing. So it's not about lying or deceiving or shouting or abusing and somehow feeling good. It's about doing it for the sake of Allah. It's about quashing that ego, right? So you might ask me, okay, how do I stay calm in a conflict? Well, go and immediately perform wudu, recite Quran. Imagine you're in a nice place. Yes, sit down if you're standing, stand up if you're sitting, lie down, right? Learning apology languages. I said, earlier, these are available. You can learn them. It's quite useful because then you'll understand what your spouse is actually seeking when it comes to sometimes some of these challenges. And, as believers, we're told we need to have husnul dhan of people, right? What about our wife? What about our husband? Husnul dhan means to think good of them, okay? And so we need to try and think good of them. And the other thing we have to remember, and there's so much to say, but I'll just finish on this point, is that don't leave things too late. If there is a conflict, don't leave things, overnight and days and whatever for it to brew and become much, much, much bigger, right? What unfortunately happens is people come to conflicts between each other after a few days with files, books and files. In July 2018, you did this to me. In 2019, you did this, and massive file. I was like, oh my God, you've kept all these records all this time. So try and erase the memory of things that have happened before, unless you're going through a serious issue and you've been requested to provide evidence or whatever. That's something else. But the key thing as well is try not to go to parents. And I know this will hurt. I know some people will get upset about this, but we're not here to please people. With all my respect to my sisters and brothers, we're here to tell the truth. And as far as my experience, which is not complete, but going to parents at a time of conflict usually is counterproductive. Because what happens is, unless your parent is Ali ibn Abi Talib or Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, which is unlikely and it's impossible, you will not necessarily and always hear unbiased reaction. How dare he? How can you tolerate this? Or whatever. I know, mashallah, and I don't want to generalize. There are some fantastic parents out there. But naturally, because you're inclined towards your own son or daughter, you're going to say, oh, let me speak to him. And when a third party involved that have some kind of inclination to one of them, what happens is the other will say, he's saying this because he's your dad. He's saying this because he's your mom. So if we can't come to an understanding based on a conflict, and we've tried then seek the opinion of a third party who is not necessarily related and who will be balanced, an alim, a person who is expertise, the counselor, a therapist, whatever, to try and see how to solve this issue.
Thank you so much. If you mentioned the apology languages, is that something that you suggest people can look up online, or is it in this in the book by Gary Chapman that you mentioned in
No,
same book?
apology languages you can find online. Essentially, it's made out of five things. Regret, when you say I'm sorry. Some people like this. Responsibility says when you say I am actually wrong. It's amending, making something better, to say how can I do it right. Forgiveness, will you forgive me? And not to repeat it in the future. I'll try not to do it again in the future. You see, these five are different. Sometimes it needs a combination. Sometimes one of them actually is more than the other, and its preferred way to somehow apologize.
Ahsan, thank you. We've got a few minutes left. I know that there are a lot of questions that have been asked on Slido. I do thank all of the mu'mineen that have asked these questions, and I have to apologise that we're not going to be able to cover all of them. I've tried to ask the questions that are mostly on the theme that we've been discussing, and I know that there are many other questions there, and perhaps this is something that we can address in the future, inshallah. I wanted to move on to another question uh, about having children. The question is, when is a good time for a couple to have children? Would you suggest, for example, that a couple has children as soon as possible, or is it something that should perhaps come a bit later on in the marriage? Do you have any thoughts to share with the community on
Well,
this?
I think it's a personal decision. It's a case by case basis. Um, you need to look at your setup. For example, are you living in your parents' house? I know some have to, and I understand that need financially because people are maybe struggling to get their own place because of the current situation, or generally they're trying to save up to buy a house, for example. I don't recommend staying in parents' house for a long time at all. I don't recommend it per se at all. But if you have to, you have to, because sometimes there's interference. Sometimes the wife doesn't have independence, doesn't have the freedom, and it impacts marital relationships. So if you're going to do it, don't make it too long, okay? And you would know how long it would be. Having children is a great blessing, but it comes with massive responsibility and a potential strain on a marital relationship. So you need to be ready in that sense, but don't delay it far too long. I would say that, come together as an understanding, as a husband and wife. If you feel that, it's the right time and you have the right resources and so on and so forth, then Bismillah. But sometimes what happens is people don't want to rush into it just to build that relationship, and different couples take different times. Some people take several years, some people take several months. It doesn't necessarily, I'm not going to give you an arbitrary figure and say after this time have children. No alim will, nobody should. But ultimately people should know themselves after discussion, after consultation. But it shouldn't scare you, by the way. We hear of all these stories. People are really scared. They're like, oh my God, I'm just having one child. The Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says, tanakahu, you have to get married, takatharu, have more children. فإني أباهي بكم يوم القيامة ولا بالسبت. I want to show you off to other nations. Even if you have a miscarriage, he says, I will say, look, this is part of my ummah. Now, having said that, I'm from the school of thought that I was recently criticized for in one of the London Jamaats for saying this, and someone came to me and says, how can you say such a thing? I am not for a quantity over quality. I'm not for someone who'll say, you know what, Bismillah, have 7 or 8 children, brothers. Bismillah. I was having a discussion with the ulama who, mashallah, he's at my age, I'm 42, and he's already a grandfather. And I said, my God, my son who's 13 is not even married yet. But he, mashallah. Anyway, his daughter got really married at a young age, now has kids, and he's telling me, tell people, let them have children. I said, Sayyid, this is not about a competition, about X number, that kind of thing. This is about raising people worthy of being in the army of the Imam, serving Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, being good Muslims, role model Muslims. I need to be able to have the tools and the efforts and the energy necessary to raise these children. It's a massive obstacle, it's a challenge, right? So we have to keep all these considerations in our minds, given all the challenges we're facing at the moment, but not be wary. sorry, not be scared not to have children or to have very, very few, but to have reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Work as a team, as husband and wife, devise a plan, discuss it, go through it, seek advice, read books, educate, and inshallah, you will get so much blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by the way, Muhammad Jafar, I don't mind answering if you want to answer any other questions on any other topics. I know this, I could
Fantastic.
do quite a lot there, but I leave it up to you.
Thank you so much. So I see we're not going to get a magic number from you in terms of how long you should leave it to have kids. So
No,
that's fine. Thank you so much for answering in the way you've done. There's an interesting, before we move on to kind of any other issues, I know we have to actually come to an end quite shortly, but I wanted to ask one more question. That there's been a couple of questions on this theme regarding equality in the relationship.
yeah,
And we've spoken about the different rights and responsibilities of the husband and the wife. You mentioned, for example, the wife's needing the husband's consent for leaving the house. Obviously, not in each and every situation, but that general understanding, as you said, and we spoke about the provisions of the basic necessities, the various rights and responsibilities you've mentioned. Uh, can you just briefly outline for us? I know it's a big topic, but obviously there are differences between the role of the man and the woman. We have the verse of the Quran, الرجال قوامون على النساء, for example, as well, and which has been translated in different ways. If you don't mind giving us a bit of an overview as to how does Islam respond to the issue of equality within the relationship? What does this really mean?
yeah, absolutely. So chapter 4, verse 34 is the verse that you're referring to. And when it says الرجال قوامون على النساء, men have, some kind of authority, as some have translated it. The next part is very important. بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض. So the idea is that we don't subscribe necessarily to equality, but more to equity. Okay, there's a difference between the two. What does that mean? It means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just, He's fair. Adala is from Him. He's the creator of justice, and He is justice. But each and every of His creation, based on what they were created for, and also their strength and their weaknesses. Okay, in this day and age where everybody wants to put every single creation, or at least human beings, in the same pedestal, and this, that, and why are men doing this, and why women can't do this, and men should be doing this, and that's fine in that sense. But you see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has empowered the gender for certain things more than the other, right? A father can never be a powerful mother like how a mother could be. And likewise, a mother can never be as a good a father as much as a father would be, right? So I know there are exceptional cases where women have to go to work, and it's encouraged sometimes for them to go to work, but not at the expense of the tarbiyah of their children. But in general cases, their power of empathy, their emotional connection to the children is much greater. So that's God given. That is actually something that they should be proud of, rather than just say, okay, why is that? Why is that? So let me give you an example. Last year, I was in America after Muharram, and sometimes it breaks down the answer of these questions if I give you a story. When I was in Muharram, I was in a particular center, and there was a Q&A session, not like this, obviously online, but something face to face. And before that Q&A session, a father came to me and says, "God help you." I said, "Why?" He said, "My daughter, she's 21. Every alim who's come to this community, she's asked him the same question, and she's not been satisfied with their answer. She told me, I'm going to ask this sheikh again, and I know he's not going to answer me properly." I said, "Oh my God, what question is this? Such a deep philosophical question that no one seems to have the answer for." So he says, "I can't tell you what the question is. I'm going to leave you. When she has the podium, she's going to ask you that question." So that was the day before. I'm thinking, Ya Allah, I'm going to have to answer this question that no alim has answered in a proper way. So I was waiting for the sister to ask, and then, lo and behold, she asks. She says, "Sheikh, I'm going to ask you a question that no one has answered before properly." I said, "Bismillah, yes, go for it." And I was waiting for that execution summary order, that kind of question that I'm thinking. And her question was, "Why is hijab not wajib on men?" I smiled. I looked at her and said, "Sister, I'm going to give you an exclusive answer that I guarantee you will be satisfied with. Her eyes became bigger. She sat up. She was sitting on the floor, and she said, "No one has. Bismillah, go on, go on. Why? Why are men not wearing hijab?" I said, "However, it comes with conditions." She said, "What's the condition?" I said, "One question I have. You give me a satisfactory answer for that question. I will also give you a satisfactory answer for your question." She said, "Deal." I said, "Tell me, why is Salatul Dhuhr 4 rak'ats and Maghrib 3?" She said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, tell me. Tell me, give me the absolute logical, rational reason why Salatul Maghrib is 3 rak'ats and Fajr is 2." She said, "I don't know. God made it that way." I said, "That's the answer to your question." You know? She said, "That's not fair." I said, "But the point here is this. The point here is this, that, in this world that everyone is, too busy trying to, change yes, there is inequality, no doubt. There is injustice going on, certainly in Muslim countries, certainly in the way that we treat our sisters. I am not happy, sometimes when we look at the situation of how there's lack of women empowerment. I'm a very strong advocate of women empowerment within the recommendations of Sharia, right? And in many cases, we need to do much more to support our sisters, to help them in every shape and form, and not necessarily only to talk about hijab and things to do with that, to do with them, for them to be involved in the decision making process in our jamaats, in our committees, and so on and so forth, and everything else that we can be incorporated, and to answer those misconceptions and so on and so forth. But it comes with a balance, right? It comes with one that, in line with the religion of Islam, the teachings of the Holy Quran, as given to us by the Ahlul Bayt and as understood by the ulama. It's a very long answer, but I tried to kind of summarize it as quickly as I can.
Thank you so much. Um, there's a couple of questions about the impact of COVID as well. Um, start with one that's regarding. Uh, someone's written this question to say that my spouse is a frontline healthcare worker,
Yeah,
and as such, there are concerns, anxieties when it comes to physical intimacy. Um, we spoke about the rights and responsibilities of the man and the wife towards each other. Are there situations in which these are there are instances where, due to, for example, concerns about health, etc., that actually these might not apply? And what are your thoughts with regards to this specific COVID situation?
well, if the husband or the wife forsake their right, there is no problem. If the for example, the wife says, "You know what, I don't mind because you're traveling," or the husband says, "I don't mind because you're a healthcare worker," and I don't. If there is an agreement amongst them, then there is absolutely no problem. It doesn't have to happen just because it has to happen. Between husband and wife, some kind of agreement comes in. If there's no agreement, then that's where the difficulty comes in, and that's where they need maybe some kind of support and help, mediation if they can't solve this issue together. With regards to the COVID situation, obviously, if the and this is from my basic medical understanding. So I'm taking my kind of sheikh hat off here. But generally speaking, if the husband and wife are living together at home, the exposure is quite high anyway. If they're living separately, then that's something else. But if they're living at home, if they're certainly sharing the same bed or whatever, then the exposure is quite high, even if one of them is a healthcare worker. So the physical interaction in itself is not going to necessarily have as much of an impact as much as if you're kind of constantly interacting and you're living in the same household. So in that sense, one should take it into consideration.
And so, not really advocating social distancing within the house between the husband and wife.
Oh no, certainly not.
Good. So there's another question about the impact that COVID has had, and we did talk about it a bit when we were discussing the introduction for the event today. And we found COVID has really made us quite reliant on technology now. We're using it for everything. I feel like we're on our screens most of the day, and alhamdulillah, there's so many blessings in this. As you mentioned, we were able to conduct this program. We were able to join each other for the Amal programs, the various majalis that you've been providing for us. there are clearly very many benefits. There are perhaps some downfalls and pitfalls as well. I wonder specifically for all of us, but really specifically for young parents. Do you have any advice on how we can actually safeguard our children in this new virtual world that we find ourselves in? Is it something that you would suggest that parents maintain a strict control over, perhaps even a censorship, that kind of a relationship? Or is it something that actually we should be allowing our youth and children to explore independently and find their own way?
It's one of the major challenges of modern day life, I think, parenting, especially given the temptations out there and given all the different gadgets and the potential ways in which shaitan could influence our youngsters. There's two ways of looking at this. Maybe it's a two-pronged approach. The first is I'm a very strong advocate and passionate in nurturing the what is known as the nafsul lawama, the conscience of the child from a young age. We can't CCTV them 24 hours a day. We can't, be the big brother, watch everything that they do. And this is wrong either, because even if we get that kind of technology, when they're 15, 16 and they go off to school or college or university, then we've lost them because then, they haven't really understood why. Why is it that I can't be spending all day playing games? Why is it that I can't watch X and Y and Z and so on? And so we have to, develop an understanding of building a relationship with our children based on know-how and the reasons, the background, the ethos behind why we do what we do. And, I know it's easier said than done. And I know everybody here listening here and watching here will probably say, yeah, I know this already. But children learn much more from action than words. Parents are incredible role models. If parents from a young age are very passionate about salah, if they themselves don't watch things which are haram, if they themselves aren't spending hours and hours on the TV or playing games, the children will also follow suit, right? Especially if they, God forbid, want to do that because of influence of friends and their parents say no, they won't see a dichotomy in behavior. They won't see hypocrisy. They say, okay, how is it that you spend hours playing your PS4 and I can't do the same for me? And don't, some of our parents, some of our brothers, they say to, well, you're a child and I'm an adult and I can do whatever I want. That's not the way to, educate and bring up our own children, because we have to be exemplars for them. We have to be leading by example of whatever we do. What are we watching? For example, when we have Netflix, some say to me, don't worry, brother. When the kids are asleep, I watch everything I want. I say to them, but sometimes they can access what you're watching. You think that, oh, everything is okay. They don't know what I'm watching. I want to watch these soap operas that have, or I want to watch Bollywood, which has all love stories and whatever. And, don't worry, they'll be, inshallah, my son will be a marja, I know. Right? So the key thing here is this, and that is technology in this day and age, because of COVID, yes, screen time. We're always on screen. Definitely have ground rules and set restrictions in the house. Food time, there should be no TV, there should be no phones with the family, and eating together and so on and so forth. The way I look at it with my own family, my own children, I don't advocate playing games on these kind of consoles as something that's a God-given right. They have to earn it, right? They earn it by doing something good, by reading, by studying, by doing their homework, and it is not proportional in a sense that I study 1 hour, I get to play 1 hour on my TV screen. No, it's not like that, because it's harmful. When you explain to them the harm, they may not understand it one day, second day, but be patient and work as a team. Husband and wife must be together on this. They mustn't be contradicting each other on this. They must be completely singing from the same tune, right? So another thing to keep in mind is that, especially for younger children, right? So we're talking 0 to 7 here. For younger children, they love the company of their parents and they get bored very easily. So if we don't want them to be in front of the screen, let's invest time with them. Let's play with them, read them stories. And this goes to our fathers as well, our brothers, right? Not only our sisters there, doing all the work. You do whatever you can, especially in this COVID situation. I know you're busy. I know you're trying to save your business. I know you're trying to sort out issues and whatever, but make this part of the commitment. Make this part of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's will build that relationship with your child as well when you read them a story, when you do interactions with them, and so on and so forth. You see, we need to create a spirit of love and spirituality at home. Now, spirituality is a very loosely, used term. People think, oh, you're flying on carpet. No, that means you do Salatul Jama'ah together at home, for example. That means you do Dua Kumail collectively, for example, by watching, or recite it together. You do Quran collectively. You have discussions about certain topics, for instance. It's a balancing act. But by all means, we should not give a green light to our youngsters. And I know some of them are spending hours and hours, including in Ramadan, playing these console games that are wasting their lives away, right? Because they're bored, they don't have anything else better to do. We need to empower them by giving them projects, by giving them initiatives, by rewarding, positive rewarding, right? Positive reinforcement. These are all help. But where do we get all these ideas from? Parents need to read and educate themselves on tools on effective parenting in the modern era.
Son, yeah, I'll just on that point. I've noticed that I think particularly in the current situation that we're in at the moment with the reliance on the technology, that actually we're becoming sometimes too attached or even addicted to our use of technology. And one of the things I found quite useful is the silence button on my phone. I found before, my phone would be constantly buzzing, and it kind of gives you that anxiety almost. As soon as you hear your phone buzzing, you want to just straight away pick it up and see what's going on. Actually, having that, maybe put it on silent, at least overnight, for example, you'll find you sleep better, I find. And then and also aside from that, having some time in the day where as you say, we actually create a rule that we're going to spend this time away from the screen. This is protected time. That might be, yeah, as you say, meal times. It might be kind of in the time leading up to salah time, so that we don't have that distraction. It might be overnight, any time after, let's say, 9 p.m. or something like that. And actually having those detox periods, I think is actually quite positive for our health and inshallah our relationships as well. I want to end with a final question for you, and that's really: do you have any final tips, any general tips on how we, as individuals and as a community, can keep alive the spirit of this holy month of Shahru Ramadan that we are now coming to the end of?
Each one of us, my dear sisters and brothers, have gone through a unique journey in this holy month. No doubt we have probably picked up some key aspects. Maybe we've had some introspection. Maybe we've learned more about ourselves, because man arafa nafsah faqad arafa rabbah. And it is that one thing that maybe I have discovered about myself. It is that one introspection, one reflection that maybe I need to carry forward after the month of Ramadan. The whole objective of this month, COVID or without COVID, was highlighted in the Quran. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. And taqwa is such a vast, huge area. How am I observant to my duties before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And this is where, coming up to Eid, one is encouraged to have some kind of personal reflection of how were they before Ramadan and how will they be after Ramadan. Some people ask the question, how do I know if my fast has been accepted? And I think the key thing here, and inshallah, we'll be discussing this on the final Majlis lecture on Sunday as well. But here's like a sneak preview of this. The key aspect, I think, for all of us is to identify areas of improvement in our lives and manage them in accordance with our own lifestyles. If, for example, my salah has not been as it should be, after Ramadan, I should be focusing on my salah. If I want to know if Allah has accepted my fast, then the longer I am better as a believer, and these changes are made after Ramadan, the more my fast has been accepted. That's essentially how it is. Okay, because acts of worship in Islam are not just there for the sake of a tick. They're not just there so that we do them and then we return back. Because unfortunately, um, there's a question there as to when is Eid, and I'll just sneak that in the answer for this one. For the followers of Ayatollah Khou'i, it is very, very likely, maybe 99% or probably 100%, but I'll say 99 not to get in trouble. It's Sunday. But for the followers of Ayatollah Sistani, it's extremely likely that it will be Monday. And don't worry about this Eid wars that go on, and people saying this and that. It's just difference of opinion. Diversity is good. No issues whatsoever. Okay. Sunday or Monday. What happens is I have to be able to be sitting down and reflecting with myself. And that is, okay, as an individual who has been tasked with a particular responsibility, my task was I am going to receive a certificate on the day of Eid from the Malaika. The certificate is on the degree of taqwa. Okay, well, first to 1, to 2, God forbid a fail, whatever it could be. I may not see that certificate, but essentially, as I progress in my life, it's a service station that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me to use for fuel in my life and to become an individual who progresses. Every Ramadan, I must develop one thing at least that is better. I must be, before this Ramadan we've just entered, better than last year Ramadan. If I'm worse, then I shouldn't let the shaitan impact me and say, okay, why am I worse? And then try to reflect. See, a lot of the times it's about holding back. This COVID-19 has allowed us to maybe push aside ourselves and just spend a few minutes of self-introspection. That is so key for us to develop. And the final message I'd say is, this month of Ramadan, I'm sure the vast majority of us have developed a fantastic relationship, or at least worked really hard to have a brilliant relationship with the Holy Quran. We have recited every day, some of us followed, Quran Khani and everything. I wonder how many on the day of Eid will pick it up and recite it. I wonder how many on the weeks and the days following Eid will say, you know what, that relationship, it's like having a friend over a month. And as soon as the 1 month is over, say, okay, Khudafiz, I'll see you sometime soon. And the friend says, when are you going to see me next? When I have an istikhara. Inshallah. When I'm in istikhara, I'll see you then. Inshallah. See you soon. Right? That friend, we need to develop a stronger relationship. We've started brilliantly in this month. Let's enhance it. Let's develop it. Let's work hard and invest time for it.
Ahsan, thank you so much, Sheikh. We've covered a range of questions. Once again, I know there are many that we haven't answered, so I do apologize for that. But thank you, Sheikh, so much. We've managed to get through a lot of topics. I feel covered some really, really interesting discussions. Actually, things about roles within the relationship of marriage, advice for those seeking to get married, equality, rights and responsibilities. We've discussed children. We've discussed technology. We've discussed the impact of COVID. And alhamdulillah, it's been a really enlightening and fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for spending the time to share your knowledge with us and provide the opportunity to the community to have those questions answered by yourself. I'd like to end by thanking all of the viewers as well that have joined in this evening, and we pray that the benefit that we have derived from this holy month, inshallah, is firstly one that is accepted, all of our deeds, inshallah, and our amal, that we have gained the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during these months, and that we can continue in our journey of progress towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over the coming months, inshallah. Thank you once again to Sheikh and to all our viewers. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.